Hello again, and welcome to the InScope podcast. My name is John Scott. I am the CEO and co-founder over at ScopeStack, where we solve all of your IT services scoping needs, all of them, every single one of them. Have a guest on the show with me today, Jason Barbee, solution architect over at C-Spire. He told me no to ScopeStack several times, but look, he's here, he's on the podcast, and they use ScopeStack. So, Jason, thanks for joining, man.
Thanks, John.
Did you like that intro?
Glad to be here.
All right, so I want to kind of unpack your journey with ScopeStack today, and I want to go to the very beginning when you told me no several times, and then we ended up engineering it together, and it was fun. That's what I want to talk about.
Right. So I remember signing up for a demo, and I logged in, and I think I remember looking for some very specific things, and I was like, this is too complicated. And so
we should give some context, though, that you had like built your own micro tool or multiple micro tools.
That's right.
To try to solve a thing. So like, you weren't just an ordinary person saying like, I want to automate statements of work. Like, you had already put a lot of work into solving specific problems.
So way before I found you, I've been a solutions architect at C-Spire for, I think it's coming up 19 years. So we've been building scopes for a really long time. And I help our engineers build scopes. I'm in the professional services division of C-Spire, and our job is to create custom projects for our clients. And in that, every scope that we generate is a little bit unique, very unique. We touch a lot of different products from all the major VARs. And so in that, our scope process used to be a Word document template that everybody would have some various version of, and they would fill it out. And hopefully it was more than a few sentences, but sometimes it was just super small. And so we had this inconsistent product that we were delivering to our customers. And then at the end of the product, we wanted to be able to close our statement with, here's what we said we're going to do, here's what we did, and get sign off from the customer.
Yeah.
And so that journey took a while, and we tried various attempts over the years. A couple of them I spearheaded, and I built a couple of them. I built one out of like MK Docs and Doc Assemble, both great projects, and they generated out some very specific scopes, but they weren't very flexible in the long run. And so I ended up on a journey to find a product that would generate statements of work.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was our initial conversation, right? Like you had all this history, and I knew, right? I mean, I knew that we came from a very similar background in a sense. Like we were doing pre-sales, Cisco oriented, right? I mean, you're a CCIE. Like, I know of that world, and so I felt very confident that we could solve the pain that you're kind of bringing forward. But it took us a couple of conversations to really kind of hash out what the solution was, and I think we just ended up like it turned out not to be really. It wasn't a sales conversation. That it was more like a pre-sale, like an engineer to engineer kind of conversation where we were collaborating on, like, we were building stuff like kind of in flight based on some of your feedback and input, and like we were going pretty fast, and like that was. To me, it was one of the most kind of enjoyable. It was fun for anything,
Yeah.
Trying to figure all that out.
That was the point where I came in, and I guess I came in the mindset. At a certain point, when you're looking for a scope of work, it's like the analogy of everything's a hammer or everything's a nail, and you're like, I just need to hit this, and I need a scope generator. And then I looked at your product, and it was more like, this is something you integrate in your operational process, and that. And so we have ConnectWise, and we had Salesforce. We had all these integrations, and it took us a moment to realize that, hey, we could integrate all those different processes together, and then create an operational workflow. And that's where solving some of those bigger problems came in with ScopeStack. And it took us a while to bite into it and to dig in, to get all the integrations worked out and built even. Some of them were just ideas. but we ended up with this nice clean flow that we can get our engineers.
So in your journey, like what changed from what you're initially looking for to like where you are today? Essentially, like in that journey, I feel like some things kind of fleshed out to your point. Like it was more than just sow automation, right? That ended up happening. So maybe kind of unpack a few of those stages, if you don't mind.
I think in the process, in the experiments of building basic generators, I think I realized at a certain point, especially when I saw the breadth of ScopeStack, it was more like this is an operational problem and not just a statement of work problem that's personal to the engineer. And so that allowed us to treat it more like that operational workflow. Okay, well, we need to. It helped us to. It helped us to generate the labor estimate. How much is this labor? And not just for the first engineer, but also to build a track record for what does it look like for the second and third engineer that's doing this project down the road? How does it help them? And building Word documents didn't build us a library of knowledge of how much a project is going to cost. But building a framework and a platform that, like ScopeStack, has allowed us to look back at a project and then understand how much did we estimate was it going to be. Yeah. But above that, it was also this process of we had approvals. We had some engineers who might send out a project, and it may not be scoped the best. It may be over, it may be under, and so we need to make sure that they're scoped accurately, as well as with a defined scope, not just so dollars estimate as well as the in scope activities.
Yeah, I mean that was always our
operational workflow.
That was always our kind of take on it. Is like, to your point, we could find statement of work automation. We could find a way to build out maybe our pricing somewhere else, but like we couldn't find was a thing that put those two together. And so we wanted to say, hey, as I'm increasing the steps, the level of effort piece, like that should have an impact on the language. And then kind of the workflow piece, and then some of the pretty awesome stuff that y'all do on like the post-sale side then, right, which was a part of our early conversation. I want to hear about that some more.
So, right. To take that further, we had our statement of work that would go out. We would say, here's what we're going to do. And then at the end of that process, we would want to close out the project, get a signature from the client, and confirm that we all agree that we did what we were going to do, what was in scope. And so I said, hey, John, I'm looking for this feature. It doesn't exist yet, but I wanted a way to automate these documents. And that allows us to take the domain language that we generate within the scope, the task that we're going to do. We're going to install this router, turn up the circuit, and this and that, and easily put it into a final document deliverable. Here's a table of the things that we said we're going to do, acceptance, and we get to send that through DocuSign on your platform with just a click. Yeah. So the engineers can just get a DocuSign back, and then we have that in our final system, which has been an operational improvement to our whole workflow.
I mean, that's huge because that was one of the things I think we had originally talked about. Yeah, you were like, we want to automate as-builts. And I was like, well, immediately I was like, we can't automate all the stuff that your engineers did, but what we can automate is, just generating a different type of document that aligns to what the scope was, but it's not the scope. It's the as-built template that your engineers fill out. And the fact that you're doing, like, I didn't realize that's what you were doing until just the other day when we were talking about it. And like, I don't know if there's anyone else doing that, man. Like, and it's kind of one of those big aha moments for me, like, and that all started with the initial conversation of, hey, you were trying to fix a couple of different things, and that collaborative work between the two of us, I think ended up paying off. So,
yeah, that was good. And before that, it was emails and faxes and sign this and print and people processes. At some point, but so that's eliminated an entire people process, and that's the depth of when you start looking at, I just need a scope generator. There's a lot more people processes that are part of the whole operation. Yeah, and that's an example of one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny though, because I think we had initially wanted to solve just ourselves. We wanted to initially just solve the statement of work piece, and as we continue to have conversations with more and more clients, and it's like oh, well, can I do workflow automation? Can I do, right? It's like some of the new stuff we're doing now is, okay, well, now that I've defined all my standards and I have a good handle on this, okay, what's the next level of maturity there? Well, maybe it's a form that someone on your sales team fills out that could recommend services, or like there's this evolution that happens when you start talking about like transformation, really. And I used to sell digital transformation, but I never really thought that's what this was going to turn out to be, and it is. Like it truly is turning out to be a transformational process. Not to make it sound bigger than it is, but like it requires transformation to really solve this problem, I think.
It does, and to hit on some of the things like growing into that platform or mindset it reminds me of we started adopting something on your platform called blueprints, and for your audience, that's where we've got a certain set of activities and tasks with a level of effort. It's like our library of services, and so we have some easy to reach services that we can just add, like quick starts. Yeah. Add this, add that, and then the engineer pulls them in, and they don't have to rethink the whole. They don't have to rethink all the scope, all the responsibilities, risks, and deliverables, all the things. It's all included, as well as the pricing is delivered out. So we're growing into those, as well as the new feature you've got around surveys and forms. That's going to be an exciting journey of like, how do we build a form-based journey of building a similar product's scope output.
Yeah. How do you think about, because I know your organization, your team, I listened to you talk about, what was it, smart bus, smart van?
The smart trucks.
Smart trucks. Like, and there was a whole lot of like engineering that went into that, right? And like that's a unique solution. And so I know the capability of C-Spire and your team, and you said it earlier, we're scoping these kind of very custom projects. So like, how do you find a balance between that level of scoping and what you're trying to deliver for your clients and the blueprint idea or the automate, like the consistency? Like, is there a balance, and are there gives and takes? Like, how have you experienced that really?
So some products, some solutions will lend themselves to more of a quick start, especially a deep product. One of them that I have a lot of familiarity with is with ICE, Cisco ICE. It can be a deep product. There's a lot of different features you can turn on.
Yeah.
Some customers aren't. Some customers are going to go through a journey, and they might want a quick start in one spot and work their way through. And so some of those features are easy to reach into that library, grab out some quick starts, and say, let's start here. And that can give you a good pricing. That gives us a good pricing point of like how to help the customer adopt up to a certain point, up to a certain scope, where we can both feel comfortable about the next steps involved, and the engineer can easily go in and continue or tweak those blueprints.
Right.
And so I'd say that's the point that you were asking about is.
Yeah. I mean, would you say it's so we hear that all the time, like we can't use a tool like ScopeStack because everything we do is bespoke or custom. We hear it all the time. I completely get, having been there and done that. Yes, every scope has its own nuance and details that are different. However, my argument to it is the starting point and the structure of the project should be consistent. And again, the starting point, like you were saying, like the blueprint can be your starting point, but then the engineer, the architect can build on top of that. They can add to it. But if you don't have that single starting point, like then it's really hard to scale, I would say, a team like that. Do you agree or disagree?
We're in ProServe, and everything we do is custom. We do have some similarities between product sets, but having a product like ScopeStack has allowed us to get that library that I mentioned, and so we can copy in certain items. But everything it's turned out to be very simple and very easy to operate. So we have languages like a task and a subtask, as well as each of those tasks will have responsibilities, assumptions, deliverables, and putting all that out there it's even easy to make it for custom statements of work, which is everything we do. So we can easily type that in and put in effort, and that translates to dollars as well as other project governances around that pricing.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And great.
I mean, it's great to actually see that like in practice, kind of the vision that we had for it, which is what you said, like the platform needs to be flexible enough to accommodate the nuance on a per project by project basis, but provide some structure to allow you to scale it and make it more efficient and, do all that good stuff. Because again, that having also, been involved with a team like these are some highly paid resources doing this work. If you can get them to be in front of clients instead of spending their time doing all this work, like that's when you start, like that pays for ScopeStack for most people, like in the first month, So
you have a point there, because we had to become experts at Word. I mean, bullet points and all the other things, and it's just it just wasn't very fun. And then you've got to organize all the thought processes around all the assumptions. But this allows us to put simple domain specific language in the bullet points, build a statement, and then I think the value that library has been very valuable to us, because the engineers can go back, they can search for, hey, show me all the products with ICE. Go back and they can grab. They can even clone that project if they're going to do something similar, and then it inherits everything from pricing to scope, and then they can modify it from there. And that's been a valuable operational piece for us.
Oh, in sneak peek, we have tags coming, so you can tag stuff. And you'll be able to search on tags.
Yeah. Good. Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I'm sure that was your idea, but you're not going to get any credit for that one, no matter what.
Right.
All right. So, so you've operationalized this process. You're kind of up and running with this whole thing. What do you see as like the next step in your journey, whether it's with ScopeStack or outside of that, anything that augments it? Like where do you see this going for your team, and kind of what's, you and I always like brainstorm on like future stuff and ideas, and we share long emails back and forth about random stuff. So like, where do you see this whole thing going, in your opinion?
So I think we're about 2 years in on the ScopeStack, and we've grown as a team in that way through the product. Where we're going is definitely continuing to try to build on that platform and to bring more operational consistency in the product sets that led themselves to that. So I mentioned ICE. I can see you've got some new features around questions and form based, and I think that's where we're going to take this. Is how many users and this type ask a bunch of questions, and we'll get out a much better statement of work that's customized to more of a full deliverable instead of just a quick start.
Right.
But I feel it's there, and I feel like there's room to grow in that area.
Yeah, and I think you've done the legwork. You've done the legwork, and your team's done the legwork to put you in a position where you can now then go to the next step of like making it even easier and more accurate, right, and more in depth. And so, I mean, the point of like these, we call them questionnaires, surveys. We should probably decide on a name at some point. But the idea being, hey, whether it's me as a solution architect filling this stuff out, or it's sales, or it's customer, right? What questions do I need to ask to properly scope out a project? And then based on how I could just collect that information, right? Just as a way to say, hey, solution architect, here's all the stuff that you needed to know, and then they can go do their job in ScopeStack. Then really the most advanced version of it is, well, let's programmatically recommend the right services based on how these questions were answered. And like we're doing that for some clients, and that's the one that we continue it's going to be awesome, right? And we have an API available, or an endpoint available in our API, and so we played around with the idea like, Teams chatbots, right? Like it just delivers a question back and you fill it out. Like there's all sorts of cool stuff, man, that we can do.
It could be.
To go from there.
And we're now to the point where we've got a year or two of history. So we're looking back at some of our projects and saying, well, how did that project turn out? What was the, margin? And, do we need to revise how we scope these projects? So it's interesting to look back once you have history in that way too.
Yeah. All right. So like, what's some advice for someone that works at an organization like yours, or they're at a VAR or an ISV?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
what advice would you give them when they're considering, like, let's just say, take ScopeStack out for a second. When they're trying to solve this problem around statement of work automation pricing, like, what are some tips that, again, you built your own tool, you've gone down this road, you've done some of this stuff, you've seen a lot of it. Like, what would you advise people, like, where to start or not start? Don't do this or do this. What would you say?
Yeah. So again, I tried at least 2 good attempts at statement of work generators, and it's difficult, and there's a lot of domain language around there. And I think in the end, I started, again, my analogy to the hammer that I made earlier in the episode was I was really looking for that hammer. But once you have to start looking beyond the scope, because there's a lot more people processes around how a scope flows through your organization, both from the creation to the approval to entering it into your PSA, like ConnectWise, and then the closure, and then bringing that back in. So there's a lot of processes that are beyond just the scope. So that's where the value comes in, and not just finding a language generator tool.
Yeah.
So that's my tip.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And again, not until you and I were talking about it, we were like, oh yeah, so in order to do that, you had to do this. And again, maybe this makes it sound overly complicated, and it really isn't. Like, you don't have to start with approval workflows. You don't have to start with e-signature integration, right? Like, I think y'all did a good job of solving an immediate thing and then kind of growing it organically from there, like adding more layers, if you will, onto the process. So, I mean, y'all are a good example of rolling it out well and doing it well, and now setting yourself up for even more scale in the future, hopefully,
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, it could. We have a whole MSP practice, and they may be interested at some point.
Yeah.
So we may
awesome.
be operationalizing that side.
That's awesome. And that's a whole other world of combining the ProServe and the managed team. Like, that was always 2 different groups, right, everywhere I worked. And so the idea that we can combine that and put it in one document and collaborate on it is a big deal.
Yes. And speaking of custom jobs, sometimes we have third-party vendors, and those can be included in this also. So that's, again, that was also a challenge in our scoping process. We would sometimes have to combine scopes, and having a domain language model has simplified things for us.
Yes.
Even for custom scopes, which is all we do.
Right. That's awesome, man. Again, y'all are doing some really cool stuff that I don't know if any of our existing customers do. And so you're leading the way in certain aspects of, like, the platform and how you're kind of changing your business and your team. And so kudos to you. And it all started because you told me no, and I'm stubborn, and we got to just nerd out on it for a little bit, and it worked out. So thank you for saying yes at some point. All right, Jason. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, talk to you about their process, what they're doing, learn more about C-Spire, what's the best way to do that?
So probably the best thing would be just, if you're looking for ScopeStack type information, ping me on LinkedIn. If it's C-Spire, check out our C-Spire webpage. Our department is in the C-Spire business side.
Got it. Well, cool, man. Well, again, thank you for joining us on the show. I think you and I could talk about really nerdy stuff all day long, and maybe we'll do another session on even nerdier topics. But I really just wanted people to hear kind of your story, because it wasn't hey, this is what I need, quite honestly. And I think that's a very, again, authentic, it happens and it should happen, right? Like, I think you were very mindful about what you wanted and not making it worse. And so I think it's a good approach. So I appreciate you sharing that, here on the podcast, man.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Yeah. All right. For those of you that are interested in learning more about ScopeStack, you can go to scopestack.io. We have a free sandbox account. You can go download it. You don't download it. It's web-based. I don't know why I said that. But you can sign up for a free ScopeStack account, kick the tires on it there. As well as if you're interested in more of these podcast episodes, you can go to scopestack.io/podcast, subscribe on all your favorite channels, and listen to Jason and I everywhere you go. So appreciate everyone listening, and we'll see you out there.